Liquor Commission before the regular meeting. And we have the swearing in of 3 council members who were elected in the last election, 2 incumbents and 1 new member. Right. So, Angie, if you want to go ahead and start on it.
Start with Mrs. Lorenz. On this side, yeah, and we're gonna kind of.
Okay, hug the mic.
Yeah. All right. All right. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name,
I, Kathleen Lorenz,
having been elected to the position of Town of Normal trustee
having been elected to the position of Town of Normal trustee
in the Town of Normal
in the Town of Normal
in the County of McLean,
in the County of McLean,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the position of trustee
of the position of trustee
according to the best of my
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And I need to sit. Who's this? Right hand and repeat after me. I state your name,
I, Karen Smith,
having been elected to the position of Town of Normal trustee
having been elected to the position of the Town of Normal trustee
in the Town of Normal
in the Town of Normal
in the County of McLean,
in the County of McLean,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the position of trustee
of the position of trustee
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Quick signature, please. Thank you. And Mr. Bye. I state your name,
I, Andy Byers,
having been elected to the position of Town of Normal trustee
having been elected to the position of Town of Normal trustee
in the Town of Normal
in the Town of Normal
in the County of
in
McLean,
the County of McLean,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the position of trustee
of the position of trustee
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Call to order a special meeting for the normal local liquor commission. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus?
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Ms. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Byers?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Preston?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
First item is the approval of minutes of the special meeting of March 20th, 2023.
Move approval?
Are there any additions or corrections? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The minutes are approved. We have one license application, a video gaming application for Cam Consultants LLC, doing business as Lilo's Cafe at 1730 Bradford Lane, Suite 200 in Normal. Motion for approval.
Move approval?
Second.
So this is a license again for gaming facility, and it's contingent on the payment of video gaming fees and any outstanding inspections from our health department, fire department, or inspection departments. Is there a conversation on this or discussion? Please call the roll.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byer?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, that motion is approved. We have no further business for the Liquor Commission. Motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. We are adjourned. We'll start our meeting in about 3 minutes. Normal Town Council for Monday, May 1st, 2023. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus?
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Ms. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Byers?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Preston?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
We'll begin with a pledge of allegiance.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
We begin with public comment, and we have a fair number of people that have signed up. Our public comment is limited to 30 minutes. Normally, last time we talked about these issues, I extended that. I won't be doing that tonight, so some of you may not get the opportunity to speak. I know many of you have contacted us via emails and that, but we'll get through a half hour of public comment here tonight. A few basic rules. I just need you to come forward, center chair, state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to state your issue. First speaker is Amy Masters.
Appreciated. This is a beautiful, successful community with much to offer, thanks to you. Aren't special use permits granted to maintain safe and desirable living, working, and shopping environments, as well as the safety, morals, comfort, and welfare of its people? Also, a granted special use permit must not be detrimental to the enjoyment of other property in the immediate area. Is Manor and Garden possibly the hottest open retail location in all of Bloomington Normal? There are rarely vacant spaces available in this competitive shopping area. I do not believe it will be difficult to find several other businesses willing to open at that location. Are cannabis facilities not to be located near schools or residential areas? This implies to me that families, children, and college students are not to be targeted as customers. This is the top demographic frequenting this corner of town. Are we going to start selling marijuana at the mall? There are only a handful of actual clothing shops left in Bloomington Normal. Most are located within easy walking distance and share the same parking area, as do many popular restaurants. Accessibility brings approval, and approval brings increased usage. I understand that marijuana is legal in Illinois. However, isn't there a reason why it requires a special use permit? It is very controversial. I assume it was legalized under the guise that it will not be available on every street corner, and certainly not the busiest corner in our town. People interested in this product will search it out. Does it need to be located and therefore marketed in a manner consistent with recruiting new users? I cannot think of a higher profile location in all of McLean County. Isn't the purpose of this town council to enable citizens to live safe and healthy lives? Hasn't our community chosen each of you to uphold these values? You set the standards for this town. What do you want to occur on your watch? The southwest corner of Veterans and College is probably one of the busiest and most attractive areas in Bloomington Normal, with the Mandarin Garden located in its hub. Aren't there 100 other locations better suited for this business? You've done an outstanding job improving Uptown Normal. It is beautiful and thriving. Please continue to carry this baton throughout the rest of Bloomington Normal.
Our next speaker is Jeremy Masters.
My name is Jeremy Masters. I'm a business owner in the community. I graduated from Illinois State University, so I've been in this community for a long time. I echo what Amy said, that you guys have done a fantastic job of building a desirable community to not just live in, but actually have a business in. And I'm not surprised that the marijuana facility wants to have that location. It is a prominent location. But you're not being called on to legislate morality, and I think that's what this discussion became the last meeting that we had here, and that's not really what this is about. It's not about legislating morality. It's about, as community leaders, where's the most appropriate place for something like this? And it's already been established it cannot go next to a school because of the adverse effects that it has on children. Well, this is an area that children frequently congregate, whether it's at the restaurants or the mall. This is just an area where children are at. So if the state of Illinois has already said you cannot put this in an area that children frequent, why would you put it in a different place that children frequent? Our community is known as one that encourages the thoughtful discourse through the educational institutions that reside here, such as the libraries at Unit 5, Heartland Community College, and Illinois State University. These institutions are rightfully positioned prominently in our community. This dispensary represents a stark contrast to our thoughtful educational community. It represents a mind-numbing drug that is designed to anesthetize brain activity. People who need or want this drug will find it. Do you really need to help promote it to the broader community by giving it a prominent place that would be directly off of College Avenue? That seems ironic to me. The state has given you the freedom of a special use permit so that you can determine an appropriate place for this. We're not trying to say that this business cannot operate in the community, but you as leaders have the responsibility to put it in an appropriate place to operate. People need to be able to express their minds. This location for the dispensary gives prominence to a drug that actually decreases brain activity and restricts people's ability to acknowledge and communicate their minds with others. It has already been established, like I said already, that dispensaries can't go next to school because of the adverse effects that it has on children. And if you use that same reasoning, it shouldn't go in a different place where children frequently congregate. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Bob Waller.
Hello, I'm Bob Waller, and I'm the owner of a Shining Star Learning Center, which is a daycare center in North Normal. The location for the new dispensary that they're wanting to put in, Revolutions, is just right across the road from us on Rab Road. It's very, very close. I think during, when we went to the zoning board, they said it was within 347 feet of our property. This location is very poor. I think it wasn't well thought out. It's in a highly residential area where there's many apartment complexes to the north and the south of our location. We have a lot of foot traffic that walks through our parking lot going back and forth to the apartment complex just to the north of us. And we also have a lot of course, vehicular traffic that goes on Rab Road. And that location that they have picked out, there's only one entrance and exit going in and out of the property. And it's limited parking, and it's, like I said, it's a very high traffic area. Besides all that, since I run a daycare, and I'm not against marijuana sales whatsoever, but it is very, very close to where children are going to be playing and being taken care of. We have age groups from infants all the way up to 12 years of age. And they're out on the playgrounds, and we're open for 12 hours. With the people that come in and out of those facilities, I know they're supposed to wait until they get home to partake, but sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't happen. And with little children in the area, it's just not a very good mix. I think this is something that parents are not going to want to come to our facility because of that. So it's going to be a big detriment to our business. And if we have to close down because of lack of parents coming in, you're going to be gaining a marijuana dispensary but losing a daycare. What kind of message does that say about Normal? I don't think it sends the proper message that we should be projecting as a community. And if something does happen to a child because somebody gets out of hand, how are you going to feel about that? I mean, that if you voted for this and a child was injured, I would have a little hard time sleeping. So give it some thought. It's just a very bad location, and I think we need to pick our children. Their safety is more important than revenue. Give that consideration, and thank you for your time.
Next speaker is Marcia Hurst.
My name is Marcia Hurst. Am I supposed to say my address? No? Okay. My concern is about the Revolution cannabis dispensary that's proposed to go in on Rab Road. My husband and I have attended both of the zoning meetings. Some of you have heard what we have to say, but I want you to know that my interest in this job is that we live in West Normal. We live down by the arena, closer to ISU, but it's a part of town that I see so much potential in. I see that it could be made into a much more welcoming part of Normal than it presently is, and I don't see that adding a dispensary is gonna help that thought. So these are the safety concerns that we have, and that is that the ingress and egress to that parking lot are the very same place. There's no outlet. If there ever had to be emergency vehicles in there, let's say a fire truck, an ambulance, a police car, it's almost impossible to turn around. Some of the employees of the EMS office on the end say semi trucks have to back into that parking lot, and they do, so that they can get their laundry done, and then pull out. So it's just a very hard place to maneuver vehicles. And it's really obvious that Rab Road was engineered and designed to be a main artery across town, and it successfully carries, excuse me, and it carries a lot of traffic through this area. Adding a dispensary in this location will precipitate more cars turning onto Northbrook, or worse, trying to pull out onto Rab Road from Northbrook, and we feel that would create a hazard. The volume and speed of the traffic on that stretch of Rab makes this a very dangerous location. Also, this site is not generally compatible with the nearby or adjoining businesses, as quoted from the zoning rules. It would be this is in an area of high-density housing that includes low socioeconomic families, individuals, and many children. It would be across the street from a video gambling business that serves alcohol, a smoke shop, a Chinese carryout restaurant, and 2 empty storefronts. These are not exactly booming, highly respected businesses. Those are my safety concerns. Beyond that, I have a few just planning concerns. One of them is that because of the heavy traffic on Rab Road, this location might be a great business venture and probably a tax revenue generator. But what quality of life are you offering the residents of Normal and our visitors by approving this proposal to place this business in an already somewhat low-valued part of town? This part of Normal has more potential to be a family-centered, inviting environment than you are considering. This is where families travel to and from the Corn Crib to the ISU Hort Center. Softball teams and fans pour down Rab Road on their way to the softball fields on Parkside Road. Why not encourage high-quality dining, specialty shopping, kid-centered restaurants to improve this area rather than write it off? Strip shopping areas like this are very successful. In other cities, one of my favorite restaurants in Champaign is the Sunsinger, and it exists in a strip business is very much like this, but it brings people in there to do good things. And finally, just because something is legal doesn't mean we have to accept its dispensation just anywhere. This proposal may fit most of the zoning rules, but does that mean we have to place a dispensary in this location? I'm asking you, as leaders of my town, to take a hard look at the future plans for parts of town other than uptown. Make a well-thought-out choice.
Ms. Waller, I'm going to ask you to
Time.
wrap it up. You're a minute over already.
Okay. Just think about your citizens before you make decisions. Thanks.
Next speaker is Jeff Fritzen.
you. We're back here tonight because of technical aspects of the proposal here supposedly that have been addressed. However, your consideration of this is not merely subjective or objective. If it were, we could dispense of the proceedings and your consideration. There are subjective aspects to the special use permit. It requires your determination about aspects of this proposal not yet proven. Impact on existing uses within the vicinity in particular is subject to your judgment. There's no test driving it. You decide and find out later if your yes was right or remain content with your no. Remind you of a couple of factors that I presented previously. One in particular, serious mental and physical health impacts of cannabis use along with public safety concerns. Federal government continues to restrict cannabis for good reason. Brain development is impeded in younger people by its use, particularly among those 21 to 25 who can legally purchase at a dispensary such as this. THC potencies have increased from the 1 to 4% of the 1970s to more than 20% in the type of cannabis smoked, and 60 to 90% THC in oils, concentrates, and others. Imagine drinking alcohol that was 500 proof for comparison. Also, public safety on the street. Experts recommend one not drive a motorized vehicle until 6 to 10 hours after consumption. Anecdotally, it was shared with me by one of the local prevention specialists that I communicate with that Normal has experienced a 60% increase over the last 3 years in DUIs, and many are those where two substances have been consumed, primarily cannabis and alcohol. It's called SAM, simultaneous alcohol and marijuana use. So that's right here for a statistic from our own community. Finally, I want to remind you of the many dedicated professionals in Bloomington Normal who have been actively engaged in building awareness of marijuana use among our youth and developing strategies to diminish it. Over the past 15 years, over $3 million in grant money has been invested in these efforts. There's a highly competitive environment for grants such as these, and we've been successful in bringing that money to Bloomington Normal. They should be supported by local government instead of having their work offset by allowing highly productive contributing property to be used for the sale of a controlled substance. Another question I would ask is, at the last meeting, there was generally a consensus among the council to revisit the ordinance and look at different aspects of it. So why consider anything under an ordinance that many of you expressed concerns about? Reconsideration, by the way, that should include opting out in the face of the overwhelming negative health and physical and mental impacts. And then another point.
Jeff, I'm gonna ask you to wrap it up. We've got a lot of people
Yep.
to.
One
line up
last
here.
point. In the ordinance, it's my understanding there's a refiling period where no application for a special use, which has been denied wholly or in part by the president of the town council, shall be resubmitted for a period of 1 year from the date of said denial, except on the grounds of new evidence or proof of change of conditions found to be valid by the president and town council. So I would ask for an answer to allowing this to even be considered this evening. Thank you.
Next speaker is Andrew Fecht, I think, and if I butchered your name, I apologize.
It's close enough, Andrew Feicht, but thanks. I've been a resident of Normal for the last 22 years, homeowner here for 18. I'm a graduate with 2 degrees from Illinois State University, and I'm a pastor at one of the churches here in the community. First, I want to thank you all on the council for your service to this community. It's a great community to live in. I come from a very small town, and we have opinions about larger towns, and I can say that Normal has not really fit any of those negative opinions. So I thank you for your service in that. And thank you again for allowing me to speak tonight. I was not at the town council meeting on February 6th, but I did watch the video proceedings, and I agree wholeheartedly with the decision that was made then by the council to not approve the location of the dispensary at the Manor and Garden location adjacent to the shops at College Hills. That night, many of my friends, a fellow pastor, and parents in the community spoke passionately about the reasons why a cannabis dispensary at this location would not serve the community's best interest. Many tonight have and will testify to the same fact. And in all honesty, I have little to add to the arguments that were made 2 months ago and that will continue to be made tonight. But I will appeal to the decision that was made 2 months ago. If the proposed changes to, for example, parking lot traffic flow, answer the council's only concerns about this business and this location, I'm not sure that much that I can say will change your mind. I do not believe, however, that any of the proposed changes address the concern that I have as the father of a 15-year-old who works at a restaurant next to the proposed location, and as the father of 3 other children who frequent that area for eating, studying, and shopping. I also don't believe that the proposed changes address the concerns I have as a resident of this community for the physical, mental, and emotional health of everyone who lives, works, or travels through that area. Just as there are restrictions around where we can, where you will allow dispensaries to be placed due to the ages and impressionability of the school children and young adults at the college, many of those same students, young adults, will be in this area near the Mandarin Garden location. And so I just ask you to consider those restrictions and how they should be equally applied here. So thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Next speaker is Jim Simeoni.
Hello, I'm here to support the High Haven special use permit. At the April 20th zoning board meeting, Todd Anderson, the chair of the board, noted that just last month, the board approved a permit for a drive-through coffee shop across College Avenue in an equally congested part of the Twin Cities Mall Land. As he pointed out, no one brought a complaint about the impact on traffic before the zoning board. Yet when it came to High Haven, the board heard 4 people arguing against the permit, making claims based on traffic and parking issues. Is it fair to focus on traffic in the one case and not the other? I think the answer is obvious, no. So let's turn to the real issue here, the stigma associated with cannabis. It is pretty clear that the Christian right in town has decided to use anti-cannabis as a public crusade to signal their virtue and power to others in town. To me, as a political scientist, there's nothing surprising in this move. Christians rallied in the early 20th century and succeeded in passing the 18th Amendment, creating prohibition. But the problem with prohibition is that it does not work, and it leads to unintended consequences that are worse than the problem targeted. While prohibition did not work, discussion about the problems associated with alcohol use has gone a long way to minimizing the harms the substance can cause. Responsible use is the key, and it is something we all must own, not just the government. I like single malt scotch, and I get some in the mall land, whether at Binny's or the Distill restaurant off Towanda Avenue. But I frequently discuss with my students the importance of responsible use. I think the same approach, advocating a prudent and responsible use, applies in the case of cannabis. I urge the council to take the responsible step here. High Haven is a highly regulated, highly monitored business. Given this legal regime, it should be welcomed into the Twin Cities.
Next speaker is Craig Stimpert.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, I am more troubled by my government than any other time I've spoken during public comment. I am adamantly opposed to the expansion of cannabis dispensaries in the town of Normal, and I do not want this in my town. I understand recreational marijuana is now legal in the state of Illinois, but as we wrestle with the legality of this very risky social experiment, and that's what it is, it's a risky social experiment, we must ask who profits from it. Well, government does, that's who. Normal Town Council stands to make a lot of money off of this if it's passed. And if this is our idea of economic development, increased quality of life, and public safety in our community, then I believe we are being seriously misguided here tonight. Marijuana is a gateway drug, meaning that it leads to transfer addiction of more dangerous drugs. What our state has done in legalizing it is irresponsible, particularly in light of the fentanyl crisis in this country. And like all things Illinois, recreational marijuana is taxed higher in Illinois than other states, only encouraging drug trafficking in the black market and increased crime in our cities. Tonight, we need to take a brief look at our own history with it right here in this community, and it's not good. Nearly 2 years ago, when the ISU community mourned the horrific murder of one of its students murdered in LaSalle County. It's still today an unsolved murder, and the only hope we have from McLean County in solving this crime is that the last known whereabouts of this victim is video footage of him exiting the Beyond Hello dispensary in Bloomington. Is this really something we want to expand in Bloomington Normal? If this is such a great idea for our community, why aren't we looking at a proposal here tonight to add a dispensary in some of the empty buildings in Uptown? Well, there are ordinances against it in Uptown, that's why. And if you don't want it in Uptown, what makes you think the rest of us want it next to Chick-fil-A or Gloria Jean's Coffee? We don't. There's more to Normal in Uptown, and all I ask tonight is that you show the same respect to the rest of the residents in this community. Just the fact that this is on the council agenda tonight is troubling to me because I know that if it is voted down again tonight, it will be back, and so will I. You may think your hands are tied on this, but they are not. You need to say the same thing that I was taught to say in high school about these things. Just say no.
Next speaker is Mark Steinmetz.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council people. My name is Mark Steinmetz. I'm one of the owners of Illinois Health and Wellness, along with my wife Kimberly, who's the Dean of the Business School at Arizona State University. Also with me tonight is my partner, James Norris, who is the social equity candidate with whom we won a license. He grew up in the south side of Chicago, which is how he qualified for social equity. Navy veteran, used the GI Bill to put himself through college and an MBA, and works in corporate finance. I have experience in the cannabis business, started a company years ago, won licenses in several states. And part of the reason I got into it is because I'm a researcher. My earlier career was 35 years with ABC and CBS Broadcasting. I was a senior manager and launched formats throughout the country, including a number of them here in Illinois and Chicago. Started WMVP, ESPN Radio, took that nationally with the company. Research has taught me, before I got into this business of cannabis, that it's good public policy. It reduces teen use and teen consumption in every state it's been introduced in. That data is readily available on the Centers for Disease Control website. They do something called the Teen Health Assessment Risk Survey in every state every other year, so it's very up-to-date data. You can correlate when a dispensary opens and what happened to teen use. Did it go up or did it go down? In every state, it went down. The worst-case scenario is it stayed slightly flat in one state. But almost every state throughout the country, and there's like 20-some, 30 now, over 30, that have introduced dispensaries, either medical and/or medical and adult use. And in every case, usage goes down, and usually after medical and then adult is introduced, it goes down even further. And the reason is because it disrupts the underground, illicit, black market, call it what you want, selling drugs to kids. The same thing happened during the alcohol prohibition. There was a massive teen alcoholism problem because they could get into Grandma's bathtub gin or Uncle Fred's Still in the Woods. When all that went away, because liquor was much more efficient to buy in the liquor store, teen alcoholism fell dramatically because kids couldn't get it. Dispensaries don't sell cannabis to children. And it is the solution to the problem. It's part of probably the biggest weapon in the war against drugs. There's nothing gateway about cannabis itself, but there is something terribly gateway about the black market that's selling drugs to kids. So if you eliminate that and disrupt that market, it is part of the problem, the solution, not part of the problem. And furthermore, it reduces crime because again, it eliminates the illicit underground market. You'll see crime drop in every neighborhood where a dispensary opens. That's been well documented in several university studies because the data is available over the last 20 years. Dispensaries are nothing new across America. It's catching on now in other states. Illinois is fairly new to it. So a lot of people aren't familiar with this data, but it's out there. And I'd be happy to share it with anybody who wants to dig deeper into this. Crime is down, teen use is down, and property values go up in almost every community where a dispensary opens. This myth and stigma about cannabis is just not true, and there's lots of data to prove it. So, I mean, I'd like to get that out in the open. I'm here with Revolution today to talk about the location next to the coffee shop, across from the daycare, but it's not across the street from the daycare. There's a strip mall that separates our location.
Mr.
from the
Steinmetz, I'm
daycare.
going to ask you to wrap.
Oh, absolutely. And there's no line of sight, because there's no contact with the children there. So I have the same concerns he would have. It's just not founded. Thank you.
Next speaker is Darren Lehman.
So I'll echo the appreciation for the time that the council spends on these types of issues, and I'll be brief because I know we're running low on time. Yeah, I'm gonna probably not do great on the name either, but my name is Darren Lehman. I am a business owner here in town. I have 5 children, 3 of them teenagers. As a student of business, I want to commend Ms. Salmanji, if I got that right, and her leadership team on the hard work that has gone into building their business. They clearly understand the tenacity and cunning that is required to compete. This is not, the objections we're raising are not personal against that team or their company, but they do reflect the very real concerns about the impact of placing a marijuana dispensary in a major artery of the city's youth and their foot traffic. If we think about where the other 2 dispensaries are located, there is no foot traffic or attractions for youth in these areas. The name of High Haven suggests a tantalizing experience of escape from the troubles and challenges of life. By allowing the dispensary to be placed in an area in close proximity to the mall and popular restaurants, businesses that attract the youth, in addition to the prominence of being seen from Veterans Parkway and College Avenue, the location creates a perception, if not an unabashed declaration, of normalization, acceptance, and even encouragement by the city's leadership that we are not only ceding the war on drugs, we have actually changed sides. In an article published in Authority Magazine on September 3rd, 2021, Ms. Salamanji correctly points out that there is more to life than business. In this case, I agree. There are things that are more important than the profits, than the attorney fees, and the tax revenues that we are looking at. Those things are our family and our community. I urge the committee to reaffirm their prior decision, uphold their commitment to defend the health of this community and those families that make it up. Thank you for your time.
And we have time for one more speaker. That'd be David Hurt.
I'm David Hurst. Thank you for allowing me to address my concerns regarding the Revolution Marijuana Dispensary planned on the corner of Northbrook and Rab Road in northwestern Normal. I continue to be concerned about this business location, that it will diminish the quality of life for residents and visitors to this area. This is an area with many high-density housing units and many children. Marcia and I volunteer nearby at the Unity Center and the Horticulture Center, both places where families thrive. Both rely on providing a safe space in which children can explore. My primary concern continues to deal with the traffic flow in the area. The location on Northbrook and Rab was designed to be an office space for Lincoln College. The entrance and the parking was adequate for office space since employees remained static throughout the day and customer traffic was minimal. The college facility closed and several businesses opened in the space. The EMS facility trains emergency volunteer staff for a multi-county area. The laundromat, a much-needed facility in an area with high-density housing and a drive-through coffee shop popular with people headed to and from work. I worry that adding another takeout business will tip the balance of traffic safety in the area. I have seen other businesses open in our community with negative impacts on major arteries. In Northwest Normal, the Dunkin' Donuts was planned with inadequate space for parking and drive-through, resulting in traffic that reduces the lanes on Main Street. The development of a large, densely populated housing complex on the Oaks Onondaga with only one divided entrance and exit instead of two different places frequently causes traffic complications as residences leave and enter the complex. My concern is that the dispensary at the corner of Northbrook and Rab is even more complicated. There's a drive-through lane impacting the entrance and exit for parking and pickup points. 2, the turn into the facility is both an exit and an entrance and happens immediately after turning off Rab Road onto Northbrook from Rab. It would be very easy for accidents to happen when people get confused by other people turning in and out from Northbrook onto Rab, from Rab onto Northbrook, people wanting to turn in the facility, and people using the drive-through. Rab and number 3, most important to me, Rab and Northbrook carry many children to and from schools and sporting events. In a day's time, there are many school buses turning down to these roads. I counted over 100 school buses one afternoon. I watched traffic. I watched children walking from buses to the apartments all along Northbrook and Orlando. Quality of life is diminished when safety concerns keep children from riding or walking safely in their neighborhoods. I feel by adding the potential of yet another business with car traffic at a complex and densely population will make this area less livable. This area has so much to offer families with daycare, laundry, garden spaces, athletic fields, schools, junior colleges all nearby. Why put children's safe play at risk? Vote this down. There are better places for this business. Thank you.
That concludes our public comment tonight. Before we go to the omnibus agenda, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the fact that we lost a longtime council member this week, Parker Lawless, a man who is deeply, deeply committed to the betterment of this community and spent generations or decades on the council. So I'd like to take a moment of silence in his honor. We move to the omnibus agenda items.
You let other people speak.
Mr. Korn, we had, Mr. Korn, we finished our public comment tonight.
Well, how can you let the other?
We had 30 minutes of public comment, Mr. Korn. We move to the omnibus, please. Omnibus agenda items considered routine in nature and will be handled with one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. Ms. Smith? Mr. Preston?
G as in goat.
I just would like to be excused from any bills.
Thank you. Motion for approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Items considered under the omnibus tonight are approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of April 17th, 2023. A report to receive and file town of normal expenditures for payment as of April 26th, 2023. A resolution authorizing the execution of a one-year contract with T2 Systems in the amount of $25,998.50. A resolution accepting bids and authorizing the purchase of two 2023 Ford F-550 one-ton 4x4 trucks from Bob Writings Incorporated in the amount of $109,526. A resolution authorizing execution of a lease agreement with the U.S. House of Representatives by its agent, U.S. Representative Darren LaHood. And please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Byers.
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. Those items are approved. Item D is a resolution to accept bids and award a contract to Stark Excavating Incorporated for the 2023 sump pump discharge and storm sewer improvements project in the amount of $424,750. Ms.
So
Smith?
moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
Yes, I've been in correspondence with City Manager Reese about this because I'm aware of some projects on my street that are impacted by this, but I was wondering if you could expand on what the process is that this sump pump program is seeking to resolve.
Yes, I will. And just to remind you to speak into your
My
microphone, please.
microphone moved, sorry.
The sump pump discharge program is an annual program that we bid out. Public Works and the Engineering Department manage this. It's an opportunity for the town to install stormwater collection systems in areas that have sump pump or stormwater discharge problems. In areas where sump pumps may be dumped directly into someone's yard and then the water flows into the pavement of the street, or maybe the sump pump discharges directly into the pavement. We go into these neighborhoods and try to work neighborhood by neighborhood to pick off some of these areas and redirect the sump pump directly into a stormwater infrastructure solution. So this is an annual contract. This year's contract, we're asking council to award to Stark Excavating. If any resident has property that has a discharge issue and they want us to take a look at it, all they have to do is notify Public Works either by email or by phone, and that information is available on our website, and then our technicians will go out and take a look at properties and make a list that we think we can address this year. And if we become aware of a project and we can't fit it in this year, then we would probably try to include it in next year's program.
I have to confess that my sump pump is guilty of discharging into the front yard. Is there a cost to the homeowner in remedying this situation when that discharge is in fact going across the sidewalk and in the wintertime subject to freezing over?
I'm looking for Mr. Otto in the crowd. Mr. Otto, is there a resident contribution to redirecting the sump discharge?
The town would install the line within the right-of-way, and typically then the resident would be responsible for connecting to the line. If the line is within an easement or within a couple feet of the right-of-way line, then we sometimes go ahead and connect it. But typically, the homeowner would be responsible for running the line from the house out to the new pipe that the town would install with this program.
Okay, thank you.
Further on this item? Ms. Ryan?
Very quickly, what are the plans to get the word out to residents? Is it going to be through social media? I think Ms. Reese said also website, but are there proactive plans for them to learn about this?
We typically get a number of calls throughout the year. We've not actively promoted it in the past. We typically are filled up every year, just with the calls we get and addressing things. Staff also observes the locations where we are scheduled to perform resurfacing or a road improvement project, and we also include those because it's important to get the water off the pavement before we redo the street. It
Right.
often
So
damages.
you've got some orders in the pipeline,
We do,
so to
yes,
speak?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further on this item?
Might as well just stay here.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Byers,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, that resolution is approved. Item G is a motion to reject bids for the 2023 Beach Street Pavement Replacement Project. Mr. Preston.
Move approval.
Second.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks. So wanted to get additional clarification. Ms. Reese wisely noted, I'm glad that Mr. Otto is still here. This action item is now the second time in some form or another that it has come to us and has come to us with a recommendation of rejecting the bids. After a couple concessions were made, or not concessions, a couple of changes, I guess, were made by town staff in terms of the scope and the timeline of what we were looking for. After the first time bids came in too high, those parameters got relaxed a little bit in hopes that it would yield lower bids back the second time. We are now at the second time, and that, for one reason or another, was not the case necessarily, and this came in 43% over engineering estimate, and as a result, it is going through a resurfacing program. So I guess, one, why are we continuing to have this issue? And two, what is the difference in scope between had one of these two bids, had the Stark bid come in line with engineering, that work compared to the resurfacing program that will now be taken on with this? What's the difference in scope between those two?
Thank you, Mr. Preston. Happy to explain kind of our methodology and reasoning behind the decision or the recommendation we're making tonight. The original scope included a pretty extensive patching program. In fact, some stretches were going to be entirely removed. There was a lot of patching that's already been done, and so our original thought with pavement was to continue that. We thought there was enough good pavement out there that we would patch it instead of completely ripping it out at a much higher cost. When the original bid came out last summer, where we also recommended and council approved rejecting those bids, the project was kind of operating, we were wanting to get it done in 2022, so it was operating on a little bit of a tight timeline with the fall weather coming in on us, as well as some of the specifications were tailored to keep residents in their driveway as much as possible. So what the feedback we got from contractors after the rejection was that that was a very tight time frame. Fall weather with the schedule, there's a lot of work out there. The price of concrete and the availability of concrete at the time was very difficult. Also, the amount of time, the short amount of window we gave them, about 12 days for residents to be out of their driveways. We also got feedback that that was a pretty short time that would require them to use what we call a higher length concrete mix. And that's a little more expensive, but it also presents a number of other problems with workability and increased labor costs and things like that. So we rejected the bids. We redid the specifications to allow more time. You know, in this case, I think, I can't remember the exact date, but we were essentially allowing all summer. So we had a long time frame. We were hoping that would lower our cost. Concrete supply and availability. We're seeing concrete costs go up now, which is going against us. But the timeline, and we lengthened the time residents could be out their driveways to allow use of the conventional mix. So we were hoping that we'd get better prices. Unfortunately, we did not. And so what we looked at is, can we go in and do a more conventional rehabilitation project like we do with several other of our concrete streets at a more cost-effective manner? And when we looked at that, we think we can and still get a very good product with a similar lifespan. With our initial cost and estimates, we made the decision to go with concrete because we thought that was going to be the best. But in actuality, what we were seeing on the ground is that wasn't the case with the costs that we got. So that's why we're recommending rejection, and we're planning to go in now, basically do some limited patching, clean the joints, fill those up, and then mill and resurface the entire street. So I think it'll be a nice product.
Further on this item? Please call roll.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, the motion to reject is approved. That concludes our omnibus agenda. We have 3 items on general orders, the first of which is an ordinance conditionally granting a special use permit for an outdoor kennel at 1824 West Hovey.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion on this item. Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, that ordinance is approved. Item H is an ordinance granting a special use permit for adult use cannabis at 106 Mall Drive.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion on this item.
Where do we begin?
Ms. Lorenz?
I guess with me, all right. This is what we've all been waiting for here, right? All right. Lots of thoughts on this tonight. I want to begin with making a case for what's right for our town. And I want to note that I believe our ordinance, as it currently is written, seems to have become out of sync with our community. And by that I mean we do not currently have a maximum or cap on the number of dispensaries that we can have in our community. And I would like to have some update from our legal counsel, if possible, or our city manager, to remind us of kind of how we got here. Why did we not put a cap on it? And what has changed in the state rules for issuing licenses that now leads us to a situation where we have not one, but 2, and maybe more, applicants seemingly to be popping up. So could I have a response to that inquiry?
Sure. I think Mr. Day is prepared to kind of, I think, talk a little bit about what we know with the state in terms of our regulations and how we got to this point. We do agree that council needs to have a work session and talk about where we want, how we want to move forward with this. I think most council members are aware, but maybe not the public, that we intend to have a work session with you in June to discuss what council might want to see moving forward. I believe we talked about that in February, but maybe hadn't identified a timeline. In this instance, we're the next 2 items, in fact, this particular agenda item and the following one pertained to the current code that we have, the one that was adopted a couple of years ago. And so we have to react to that. We were not in a position where we could deny someone's application or cause them to withhold submitting an application. So we are reacting to their application based on the current regulations that we have in place for special use. In regard to what has changed at the state level between when the zoning classification was adopted and today, I'm going to defer to Mr. Day, who has some information about what we know in terms of the state licensing. And Mr. Day, would you care to share?
Be happy to. All right, so when we excuse me, passed our ordinance back in 19 or 20, after the state changed the statute, at that time there was an estimated 75 licenses that the state was going to issue, and they were based on state police districts. I think we were looking at a total of 3 licenses for our current state police district. The state's rollout of their state licenses has been complicated. They've had some issues. When they went to roll out the licenses, there were a lot of lawsuits and litigation over who was entitled to the licenses. a lot of log jams in their system. As a response to that, the General Assembly came back and passed or updated the statute to start issuing additional licenses. I think they are now up to 190, around 190 licenses around the state. They come out in usually tranches of 50 or so. The last one we've seen come out was in February. They had a conditional license for the special applicants. And that is still pending. There's going to be a lottery on who gets those licenses on May 5th, I believe is the date for the lottery for those licenses. So there's, out of that, I believe there are 10 applicants for our particular area, our BLS district.
10?
There are 10 applicants. There's only one going to be awarded out of those 10. So there'll be one for the, one's been awarded to this BLS district and.
One more?
Right. For our district, which incorporates McLean and DeWitt County.
And when was this update by the General Assembly passed?
There was I think it was 22, they changed the general state statute and then the IDFPR, the Department of Financial and Professional Regulations, have been rolling out the licenses. So they're the ones that rolled out this last one in February. So as of right now, under the statute, this looks like it should be the last, but we can't tell what the General Assembly or the state agencies are going to do with additional licenses in the future.
So when we wrote our ordinance and passed it in November of 2019, we did not put a cap on it because at the time, the rules were for 75 licenses to be dispersed across the state. And the expectation was that there would be no more than 3 for our district, which then was defined by state police district. Is that correct?
Mostly.
Okay.
So that was,
Anything-
I mean, that was the original. We always knew the state was going to issue more than 75 licenses. I'm sure we discussed that at the time. That was their original rollout and what was going to be their Kickstarter, what they thought. It was really the litigation that over the original 75 licenses that really amped up the number of licenses that they were creating at the state level. So the state dramatically accelerated the licenses they were issued, but I don't think we were ever looking at, there would never be more than 3 out of our.
Well, as a
Victor
council
area.
person, that was my understanding at the time that this was being reviewed and we passed it. I remember thinking to myself that because at the time Bloomington was doing their ordinance as well, and they have actually written a cap into their ordinance of 2, and they have 2. And so I remember thinking to myself, all right, they could have as many as 2, we could have 1, 3 for the state police district. That seemed manageable, okay? As I measure it against, and this is the next point I want to get into, as I measure it against the threshold of adoption, let's put it that way, of our community. And by that, I really want to speak to some issues that were shared tonight, as well as 2 months ago, that I think should not be lost on all of us sitting here today as we represent members of the community. And that is, we are a Midwestern town, okay? The middle of the Midwest, maybe. And many people spoke of family values and sort of traditional mainstream values. It's who we are here in the middle of Illinois, in the middle of the Midwest. And we need to honor that. We need to honor who we are. We're not from Arizona. We're not from Portland. We're not from Miami. We're not from Boston. We're normal. And we're in the Midwest. And I really, really think as representatives, we need to pay some deference to the appetite that our community has for widespread adoption of this industry. Not casting a rightness or wrongness on it, but it's new. And some of those other locations that I mentioned, more stereotypically, are early adopters. You know, the coasts are more early adopters of things than the good old Midwest, for better or for worse. And I hate to put labels on us. I, for one, don't like labels, but I am trying to convey an appreciation for the temperament of our community. And let us not forget that. And right now, with an open-ended opportunity for this industry to set up shop here, we have no cap. I think that's stretching beyond the current comfort level of our community. And I stress current comfort level because maybe in time, there may be more adoption and comfort level with this industry. Somebody talked about the history of Prohibition era. You know, we maybe are in, you know, historical times here where we're getting used to a substance that, much like during the Prohibition era, people didn't feel comfortable with. And, you know, I just go through and I think about the people who spoke here today. I look at some of my notes that I've gotten from people on email. You know,
Ms. Lorenzo, I'm going to ask you to wrap up and hit your 11.
Oh, boy, okay.
No, but I will come back to you on that. But finish your thought, please.
Okay. The sentiment of the emails, the sentiment of tonight for many of the speakers, I think is reflective of a spirit and a temperament of our community that we need to keep clear in our minds as we make our decisions tonight. Thank you.
Further discussion, Mr. Byers?
Thanks, Mayor. Had a few thoughts on this. I've had the chance over the last few weeks to engage in a lot of conversation about this. I've talked to customers of the businesses in this area. I've talked to some of the businesses in the area. I've talked to the applicant as well. And specifically from the traffic and parking side of things, I think I've had a pretty strong consensus that we need a long-term solution to the congestion in this area. I think anyone that's gone over there, I know I am a frequent customer of many of those businesses. There's a lot of traffic. I think many of us have probably been backed up before over there. So from the long-term perspective, definitely need to have a conversation, hopefully that the town can be a part of, along with the businesses in this area, making this area flow better so it's safer for everyone and that our businesses in this area can thrive. Another sticking point that I've had in this process is that the reason that we are having the conversation for this specific business is due to the special use process. And so when this applicant yeah, it's, hello?
There it is.
Oh, okay.
You'll learn. Yeah.
Is this too loud? Okay, thank you. And a sticking point that I've had is that specific to traffic and specific to the parking situation in this area, this applicant that it came through the first time was rejected and now has added new parking space and also a plan for the traffic in this area. Those things would not come from any other business that was not a special use. So if we were not having this conversation tonight, we would not be having a conversation about adding extra parking. We would not be having a conversation with that business about changing the traffic flow of the area. So because this was special use, we have those concessions made. So that is making it a net positive compared to another business that would come to this area. And that's something that hasn't been lost on me. And then another point too, just from the special use process standpoint, regardless of what type of business is coming before us as a town, whether it's a cannabis dispensary, whether it's a real estate development, we as a town, we've set forth a zoning code, we've set forth a series of rules that if someone of that type of business meets that zoning code and meets the requirements of the code, that they can do business in the town of Normal. I know we're starting to have a conversation tonight about changing the rules in the future, and that's fine. I look forward to having that conversation. From my perspective, I think the standards have been met, and that'll be a big part of my decision tonight. Thanks.
Ms. Smith and then Mr. Preston.
I understand the concerns about the town of Normal after reading Flick Facts today, who pointed out that in 1866, Jesse Fell, who founded the town of Normal, actually solicited the signatures of every single resident of Normal, man, woman, and child, to prohibit the sales of alcohol in our city limits, and that that policy stood until the 1970s. So I understand that that is part of Normal's history. Knowing that, as Ms. Lorenz pointed out, that when we went to draft our special use ordinance for cannabis, we modeled it after the liquor code. The liquor code says these businesses cannot be situated within 100 feet. It is not appropriate to extrapolate from the prohibition against locating close to schools or churches that also extends to children. That's an unfair interpretation of the restrictions of the liquor code. And in fact, we have within the boundaries of the liquor code ordinance, we have a gaming place next to the Shining Star Academy. So if there's a lot of speculation about the types of customers that these dispensaries would attract, but since they're not there now, there is no evidence that that is in fact to be taken as fact. And as a council, we are tasked with enforcing the ordinance that we put in place. Now, I will ask the indulgence of the town attorney, because one of the speakers and someone I spoke with this afternoon asked about the requirement to postpone bringing an action back within a year under special use, and I did share that with the attorney ahead of time, so with your indulgence, I'd ask him to clarify that point.
That pertains specifically to the refiling of the special use application as it pertains to the current code requirement regarding refiling, right, Ms. Smith?
Yes, someone asked that if since High Haven had come here in February, and what this individual pointed out, and I believe the other commenter was saying is, how are they permitted to come back before 1 year is up?
Sure. There is a restriction in our zoning code 15.
Mr. Day, can you talk more into your microphone, please?
Mr. Byers, it's never loud enough, just so you know. Our zoning code has a restriction on resubmitting special use applications. It's 15.10-5, subsection C. Under that provision, it says that you can't bring a special use application back within a year after it's been denied. When it's talking about a special use, it's talking about, when we say a special use, it's the full panoply that came before the council, including the site plan, all of the restrictions, everything. It's not just can we sell cannabis, or can we have a church, or can we have any special use here, and it's denied. It's the special use that comes before, which was the parking plan, all of the lighting plan, the restrictions, everything that came with it in that prior item that was before the council. In this case, there was a significant change in that plan. It's not the same special use that came before you before. They've completely made major changes to the site plan, adding significant parking. It's not the special use that came before. So you can't just come and say, well, you denied me last time, I'm going to submit the exact same thing and hope that you're smarter next meeting or dumber next meeting, whatever your position is. But if you make a significant change to your plan so that it's not the same use that it was that came before, then that provision would not apply. And in this case, it is a dramatically different plan than the one that initially came before council.
Thank you. So again, we're tasked with evaluating these applications on the basis of the ordinance that we have in place now. It is unfair to move the goalpost and say, we want to change them now that we are sensing this opposition and make new rules. I don't doubt if any of us would welcome that kind of treatment. And we also have to balance the rights of the property owner. Mandarin Garden owners are looking for retirement. This transaction represents a way for them to do that. And while a number of people have suggested opportunities for alternative tenants to these properties, none have presented themselves so far. And as one letter writer pointed out to me in a letter, and I believe it was shared with all the council, that in his community, there was opposition to a business and for a vacant property, and it was voted down, and 3 years later, the property is still vacant. So again, the property owners have rights that we have to recognize. And I'm sure if we owned property, we would not relish the idea of the town stepping in to tell us, no, you can't make this transaction. And neither can we dictate that we would like a certain business to be there, because whatever business goes there, who will not have customers coming there? That is just part and parcel of this. So I understand the personal sentiments against this. I was at the Zoning Board of Appeals trying to be like a quiet mouse just to observe. At that meeting, Mr. Day had an opportunity to give a summary of our special use permit, and the comments from the public were balanced, and the letters I've been getting are balanced. It was very much, those speaking for it are pointing out that by legalizing it, we are helping to drive down the cost. At the previous meeting, at $300 an ounce does not exactly lend itself for casual use. And while it's certainly not desirable that we have anyone using it, the regulated marijuana is not going to be laced with fentanyl, which is a leading cause of death. So, and there are concerns about security. Both facilities have security requirements they have to meet. The High Haven will be installing lights there that aren't currently in place. So there's many measures that are being taken to address these concerns, but we can't address the concern if fundamentally you are opposed to the sale of marijuana. We can't do anything about that. What we are tasked with, though, is recognizing our responsibility to uphold the ordinance that we ourselves put into place. Thank you.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. I do think that last comment of Ms. Smith's is one that I want to start off with again to beat a dead horse here. We are not tonight making a decision on whether or not recreational cannabis is legal in Illinois, right? I mean, that decision was made back in 2019. If you don't like that, take it up with your state legislators and the governor. I don't think there's much of a chance of them reversing it, but they would be the ones to do that, not us here. And all right, so once the state made recreational legal, we put forth, as a council at the time, special use permit process to outline what the regulations, what the restrictions were in order to have a cannabis dispensary in Normal. We have a map that I believe is on our website. If it's not, hopefully it will get there, that outlines if you meet all of the required stipulations of our special use permit for a cannabis dispensary, these are the only possible places within Normal that would even meet those for a dispensary to hypothetically exist. And it's not much. I mean, there aren't a lot of places when you look at that map. And so, you know, I understand, and I don't entirely disagree. I mean, I don't disagree with the argument of, well, we don't want it here. We'd like something else there. Fair enough. We may all agree on that, but that's not our decision. We don't dictate, oh, this business, you are going to go there because we would rather have the dispensary over there. I mean, we can set up the framework and the restrictions but we're government. We don't dictate the private economy in terms of what business transactions take place in what areas within the confines. So, that said, the special use permit regulations, there's a couple things that came up as repeated themes. From my standpoint, the first of which is traffic and congestion in that area. Two thoughts on that. One, I think ultimately that is the town's problem more than it is High Haven's or the existing businesses. Those are our streets where they kind of L there. And frankly, that is an issue today. That will be an issue with or without High Haven tomorrow, and would be an even bigger issue if not High Haven, but let's say another restaurant goes into the location where Mandarin Garden is. You know, if you add to the others around there are restaurants. If you had another fast food place in that area that has the same peak times and will generate significantly more traffic than High Haven will during the same peak times, I think your traffic issue is much larger than it is with this proposal. And it's also not High Haven's problem, frankly, it's ours to solve. And I do hope that long-term, to Ms. Lorenz's point earlier, we get serious about making an investment to address that in the most effective way we can to make navigating that area just as conducive as possible given all the economic activity there. All right, that's traffic. Parking, that was something that I brought up back at the February meeting as a big sticking point for me. With this, they came back with the addition of 15 spots, I believe, which is significant. That's about 35 to 40% increase in number of spots from the original proposal. In that sense, you know, whether or not that is considered adequate or not, it's a significant increase. And with the site limitations that they have, you know, it's not a 10-acre site. That is addressed. The big, and so when I look at these pieces, and on paper we're talking about, do they meet the special use permit requirements or not? In those two boxes, I think there's a reasonable argument that yes, they do. Like we've set this forth, and they've, you know, reasonably met the stipulations that we said you need to meet in order to have a dispensary. Now, I want to go back to the refiling period and make sure that we are crystal clear, because for me, this very likely is my vote's 1 of 7, but this very likely is the decision maker for me with the section that Ms. Smith had brought up to Mr. Day a minute ago. I'd like to read that. It's section 1510-5. Refiling period is item C. All right. No application for a special use which has been denied wholly or in part by the president and town council, president is the mayor, shall be resubmitted for a period of 1 year from the date of said denial, except on the grounds of new evidence or proof of change of conditions found to be valid by the president and town council. So I read that as saying that you cannot refile within a year unless the president and the town council, the mayor and council, find the new evidence or proof of change of condition valid in order to then be able to refile. Obviously, the refiling has already happened. We didn't take a second vote after our February 1 to say that we find it valid and they can refile. Help me understand the dynamics of this clause very specifically as to whether or not, because if they don't, if they shouldn't be able to refile, then they haven't met the requirements of special use permit. There's a clause in it. If the refiling, if I'm reading it incorrectly, and I'm not an attorney, that very well could be, then in my mind they have. So,
Yeah, so the key word you want to look for in that section is, it's an application for a special use can't be resubmitted. So we look at the application, what's included in the application. They have not resubmitted the same application. It's a different application because it had significantly different changes than the first application did. So it's a restriction on a resubmittal of the same application. If you were to read that otherwise, you would have to say anybody that came in and asked for a special use and the town council denied it, then nobody can do anything on that for a year. That's not the case. I think we'd run into pretty significant constitutional issues if we took that position. So, yeah, you're focusing in on, is this the same application that's been submitted? Now, if you do resubmit a same application, they can come in and say, hey, we think there's new evidence that, somebody lied during the original zoning hearing, or Chick-fil-A went out of business, traffic's not an issue anymore. Those would be changes in conditions. It's not a change in the new application that requires council approval. It's a change in existing conditions for an existing application. That would require special approval. I don't know that that's ever come up. I would have concerns about council sort of prejudging a case, sending it back to zoning board and then making a decision on it. If that situation were to come up, but that's not what's happening here. This is not the same application that the applicant had submitted before. It's a different special use application. So therefore, it's not going to be subject to this restriction.
Okay, so the start of that clause, again, is no application for special use which has been denied wholly or in part by the mayor and council shall be rescinded. So what we are voting on tonight is not something that wholly or in part was denied by us in February. Is that question honing in on the main point of what you're telling me?
I mean, certainly if we come in and say, no, you can't do this for X, Y, Z reasons, they fix everything, they come back, then you can resubmit a different application.
I think the confusion, so they're submitting a new application, is
Right.
what you're saying, which is a revised application from,
Yes, it's a different
January and
application
February.
that was denied before.
and then the other confusing part of the language is it says it couldn't be resubmitted unless president and board of trustees says it can be resubmitted. And I think that's where additional confusion comes in, because then the language, I would suggest moving forward, we can discuss this also at the upcoming work session, much to discuss for sure, is whether or not that particular language needs to be cleaned up or not. Because what it's saying, in addition to what Mr. Day was indicating, is it would lead you to believe that the applicant needs to come back to you first, see if they get your approval on the application, and then turn around and refile it or file it for zoning board, and then come back to you after it goes to zoning board. So that doesn't seem to make sense for an applicant to come here to get your thumbs up and say, yes, go ahead and file, then go to zoning board, and then, goes through the regular process. So I think that's additional confusion about that it can't be resubmitted unless you all give permission.
I agree that
Yeah.
those two pieces are confusing, which is why I keep asking the clarifying questions on it. So, all right, so the first one, I want to make sure that I am very clear on this. So there are 2 points, the first of which, the special use application that we are voting
Mr.
on.
Preston, you've hit your 10 minutes, so kind of tidy it up and we'll come back to you if we
All
need
right.
to.
This application is not in whole or in part what we denied in February, correct?
Right. It's not they've not resubmitted the same application that they did in February.
I'll leave it there.
Ms. Harris?
I'm not gonna rehash anything tonight.
Mr. McCarthy?
I'm going to talk about very little additional. One of the benefits or consequences of speaking near the end. First, I want to start off by saying thank you to each and everybody that emailed, called, text messaged, stopped me in public to discuss this and get my thoughts or feedback, which I didn't give much thought or feedback because mostly I just want to listen to what everybody had to say. I echo the comments from my counterpart. It's pretty even from everything I heard. And so clearly we have passionate feelings on both sides of this issue. And whatever we decide tonight, some people are going to go away disappointed in whatever we decide tonight. for that, that's unfortunately the way our job has to get discharged up here. But for whatever it's worth, I sincerely appreciate all of your feedback. It does give us a sense of what we're looking at from how the community feels. I do want to echo some of the other comments briefly to say, as I understand our process, we set up a process that was articulated, and the applicant appears to have followed that faithfully and meets the code requirements. And although somebody mentioned that we have discretion in our authority, that is not the discretion to apply the rules unevenly or in discrimination of one business versus the other. We do have to apply the rules fairly and evenly to any business and not penalize one business because we like it or don't like it, their product. Having said that, I think it's interesting that the applicant went back and made changes and arguably had already met the code and submitted a new application to try to assuage some concerns. And to me, if we took the word cannabis out and we looked at any other business in the town of Normal who was trying to do that and get this done, we would laud them for those efforts. So as a small business owner myself, I know some of the challenges of running and operating small businesses. To turn around and go back and change up your plans a bunch substantially takes time and money and effort to do so. And hopefully that speaks volume about their intent to be good business partners in our community. Our latitude here, as I understand it, is to decide whether or not they meet the code. And the special use is for us to be able to put more stringent rules on businesses that operate in specific districts. And without special use, they would be able to operate by right, the same code that any other business. If that is indeed my understanding in an earlier conversation, corporate counsel confirmed that is our rule, then this business is meeting some of the most stringent land use code in our community. And there's not a lot of room here for us to say no, in my opinion. So as it stands, I'm supportive. Thank you.
Friends?
Thank you. I'll try to speak faster. All right. So just to tidy up from my last comment, the argument about the ordinance being out of sync, at the risk of sounding maybe a bit harsh, I do want to point out that I am disappointed that we did not revisit the ordinance sooner when those General Assembly made their changes. And so I really, really want us to revisit the ordinance sooner than June because, and I know we're already in May, but there may be more licenses coming in the pipeline. And I think we need to, for the sake of the sentiment of our community, as I said earlier, revisit this ordinance ASAP. Having said that, I want to pivot also to the traffic. And I understand the importance of sticking to the ordinance as it's written now, however flawed it may be. And I too recognize that particularly the applicant has come back and mitigated and done what they can do to affect a troublesome traffic situation. The traffic situation exists now. And I applaud them for coming forward and doing what they can do, particularly with the owner that they're leasing from, to improve the in and out flow of traffic. The rest of the job is actually that of the towns. We need to, and it is basic core services of the town to make sure that there is safe vehicular traffic, safe roads in and about this community, whether that's to your house or to your business. And so I want to point out that I'm very happy to hear that I learned that an intersection design, IDS, what it stand for again? Intersection design study I learned about last Friday has already begun and results, I think, in the next couple of months, that focuses specifically on the feeder from College onto Mall Landmark Drive. That will undoubtedly, as you get the results, spill into what is happening beyond that, into Plaza and Baxter. And a couple of us met with nearly all of the business owners, Chick-fil-A, Core Eatery, Pancake, Chipotle. And I asked this question. I said, if I had a magic wand and I could fix Baxter and Plaza now, would you be okay with whatever went in there? And to a person, they all acknowledged that the problem is the traffic. So besides fixing our ordinance, I want to put a call out for an expedited, accelerated effort on our part following the completion of the IDS to move forward on whatever project would come out of that study to improve the flow from College onto Mall, Landmark Drive, onto Baxter and Plaza. I think between the ordinance being rewritten that better matches the community's spirit and fixing the traffic, which is basic bread and butter of what a municipality does, we need to do those things ASAP. I spoke so fast, I don't know if I said everything. I will just leave it at that. I think those are two key pieces. There is one more, if I have the time. I am concerned about the issue that was raised just tonight about this code of bringing it back within a year. I think I hear what you're saying, and I would like a nod of affirmation that we are not, in effect, violating our own code by entertaining this applicant to come back. Is that a true statement?
That is correct.
All right. With that said, I feel comfortable bringing it back. I feel comfortable with what they've changed. It's not ideal. The ordinance under which they're operating doesn't match what I believe is the temperament of our community, and we need to fix the longstanding problem, which is the traffic at Baxter and Plaza.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, just, I'll be quick. I just want to take 1 minute to summarize now that I've had a few moments here since my last time, to kind of gather thoughts from my clarifying questions before. As I had mentioned before, I think that other than the refiling period, they met the requirements of our special use permit. Whether you like the special use permit or not, that's what's in place, and they met them. Hence my repeated questions on the refiling period, that being the sticking point. And after being told 3 times that they are not violating the refiling period, I think it has sunk in that, you know, especially not being an attorney and asking an attorney, that I'm not going to ask a 4th time. And so it's pretty black and white in my mind, whether or not we like the special permit or not. And I do think that's a conversation we need to have quickly about changing it if that's the will of the majority of council. But it is what it is right now.
Thank you. Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. Item 8 is an ordinance granting a special use permit for adult use cannabis at 1609 Northbrook.
Move approval.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? I think we may have had that discussion.
I have more. It's a brand new topic. Okay, let me flip my pages here a little bit. Never a good thing when the topic has its own file folder, which I have here. Okay, so talking about the next applicant on Rab Road. I think this one, you got to go back and you got to look at that special use permit. And you have to say that, couple things. It's failed the zoning board twice. Talk about that a little bit more if you'd like, but that is noted by me. That I'd like to make the argument that it does not meet the special use permit based on parking. And in my mind, I try to think of this as a permitted use, not a special use permit, but a permitted use. And I tried to be very site-specific. These were guidelines that were told to us as council members from our staff, our legal counsel, that we needed to be this precise on how we interpret this. So site-specific, and think about it. Can't hold them to any higher standard than a permitted use. Okay. They are wanting to put 12 or 13 more spaces in this lot. Some, or maybe even most of those, I think 7 or 8, are intended to go in the back behind the strip mall. I drove back there. I'm no parking expert. I think it'll be tight. It looks to me to be tight to put parallel parking in there. I had a hard time turning my car around, like driving through and turning back around. I had to back up and turn it a few times. So if you're going to be parallel parking and trying to come in there and parallel park around some other cars and then try to get out, it looked kind of like a pull-in, back-out situation. So I was very concerned. I'm very concerned about that. I'm also very concerned about adding whatever number to the front of the lot for the reasons that were actually highlighted tonight by many of our commenters. The single in and out of this parking lot, and that the practice is, and we learned this from one of the nearby neighbors, tenants, that the practice is for people to come in and try to do a U and come out of the parking lot. And that already there's been one incident where a moving car hit a parked car. And so it tells me that with 37 spots in that lot, I'm hard pressed to think that stuffing more cars in there is going to be a good thing. And so this is the kind of language that I think the special use permit speaks to. Is this going to cause, this business is prompting more parking spaces by code. Okay. More parking spaces in this lot, to me, whether it's special use permit or not, seems like not a good plan. If this applicant had come forward, it almost feels to me like High Haven 2 months ago. If they could come forward with a modification to the traffic flow, you know, that begins to start to speak to me. But as it sits right now, it seems like it's got all of the flaws that we were talking about 2 months ago with respect to the past applicant, not to be conflating the two. But I want to go back to what it is we can impact here and can speak to. And this one, to me, does not meet the threshold of parking safety, whether it were to be another coffee shop or another laundromat, or in this case, a dispensary. Permitted or special use permit, this site, to me, does not cut it. The last point I want to make on that is the applicant told or conveyed to us that they have spoken to a number of the tenants and that tenants were okay. And yet we received an email from the EMS Training Center citing some of the concerns that they have about parking and the flow of traffic. So I'm not sure that they really, in fact, did check the box of making sure that the tenants were okay. So those are some of my concerns right off the bat that I think we need to really think about this one not meeting the criteria of special use.
Mr. Preston?
Looking for any additional detail as to why zoning denied this 2 times from whoever wants to take it.
Sure, I'll start. Mr. Day can jump in and then we'll supplement with more staff if we need to. I believe in this particular instance, the zoning board recommended denial because of the proximity of the proposed retailer to a daycare facility, acknowledging that the daycare facility is beyond the code requirement. The code requirement is 100 feet separation. The daycare facility, I think, is maybe 3.5 times that. But it's my understanding the zoning board was less than comfortable with our 100-foot distance, acknowledged that's what the requirement is, thought the requirement wasn't enough, and recommended denial because of that. Is that an accurate summary, Mr. Day?
Yes, that's correct. So it went up to zoning board twice. The first time they voted it down, but because of a procedural issue that they had, they didn't actually specify a reason as to why that they had voted it down, which is why it had to go back to get the clarity for the reason. And that was the reason that they put in their findings and recommendation that they believed it was too close to the daycare center that was across the street. And they put in their recommendation that the town reconsider the distance requirements.
Okay, thank you. I do, in the future, I hope that zoning follows the code as it is. Because that's what it is. But I appreciate that clarification. I share Ms. Lorenza's concern about parking here and the availability of adequate parking. A couple reasons, one of which she already talked about, the tight nature of the reconfiguring from 37 to get up to 50, and that is for this entire strip. Revolution would be the middle of 3 tenants, if I'm not mistaken, having adjoining neighbors on both sides. And for me, I could not echo strongly enough. I do not consider the parking as proposed, though they are adding more spots. I do not consider that adequate given the fact that it's a multi-tenant building with multiple other operators within that same site.
I have a question for staff on this. And I think we're applying a double standard here. And I would ask Mercy or Greg to comment on the fact that if a coffee shop or a small restaurant went into that location, would there be a reason to consider denial based on parking?
Well, they wouldn't be asking for a special use, so it would be, go ahead and respond,
Yeah.
Mr.
Again,
Trumbo.
maybe just a quick history lesson too. This building was originally constructed as a single tenant occupancy and had a different parking ratio. So back in the day when it was originally built, it was built with parking spaces, 1 space for every 300 square foot of floor area. We did make a change in our code years ago when we went to a multi-tenant situation, which is what this property became. What we were finding under the old code language is that you would have an insurance office that we would assess at 1 for 300, and then you'd have a coffee shop that would be 1 for 75. And then it got into a situation where it was difficult for staff to certainly manage. It was really up to the landlord to say, ultimately, here are the number of spaces you get with your lease. It meets the town's code. So what we did is backed into basically a multi-tenant situation where we kind of split the difference. And so it's a parking space for every 200 square feet of floor area in a building. We don't look at the tenant mix per se. If they're a permitted use in B1 and the building and the site provide the parking ratio, and in this case they do, it's 50, then it's code compliant, notwithstanding who the tenants may be, as long as they're an appropriate use in B1.
Right, because tenants can change, and
And they
then we
do.
would have continually rotating parking requirements based on who is occupying the space.
Thank you. Further on this item? Ms. Lorenz?
Does anyone else want to go first?
Ms. Smith?
I've noticed in their paperwork that they emphasize the fact that they have an online process for order taking in order to, in essence, control the flow of customers to their location. And I'm not sure if it's in here or I'm missing it, or maybe the applicant is here to say about how many customers they are targeting to bring in at a time to address the concerns about flow of, because I know I've driven by the Beyond Hello because I had business at the Kinko's. I think it's FedEx now, whatever. And I don't see a lot of in and out. I do see a number of cars parked, which I suspect might be employees, but I don't see the high traffic flow of customers in and out that seems to be a concern. And I was just wondering if anyone recalls reading that in the paperwork, or if the applicant is here to address their target.
Ms. Davidson?
So I believe it says in the report that they estimate about 2/3 of their orders come through online, and so they are able to control when those folks come to pick up their order. So it helps even out the traffic in and out of the building.
So they would, in essence, manage how many customers are coming to them in the course of a day and when those customers are coming to them.
I think it's a question of timing. Yes. So however many people are ordering or want to shop there, if 2/3 of them can do it online or are doing it online, they can say your order will be ready at 6:30 instead of 5 or whatever works. So.
And I do see the discussion that they have overflow parking on Northbrook.
There's a property across the street to the east that the same property owner also controls, and they have said that they would be able to park there. Now, we did note in the report, though, that that property itself does not meet the code required parking, although there is very often open parking there, but they couldn't use that towards their required parking. But we mentioned it because, in fact, one could park there probably much of the time.
Well, I do know my gym has an agreement with the adjacent business to allow their customers to park on Sundays and after that business closes.
So I will ask a question for clarification, because I'm not at all comfortable with this parking conversation, in the sense that, say, a smoke shop decided to locate in that, would they be code, would it be code compliant? I know they don't have to ask for permission. Would they be subject to any code issue?
Well, yes, meaning, so as vacant spaces become reoccupied, because that's what we have here, is we have a situation where it was cut up into 4 or 5 different lease spaces, and this one space has been sitting empty for several years. And so as we do a safety inspection and consider who's going to occupy the space, in this particular case, it's a use that requires a special use, but if it wasn't, as part of our analysis, we would make sure that the site does have adequate parking.
Mhm.
So in this proposal with 50 spaces, or even if take this out of the mix and say a smoke shop that doesn't require a special use comes in, and we go out to the site and they had 38 spaces, we would say, well, in order for you to be able to occupy this space, you need to have 50 spaces on this site. So that would be a condition of their occupying. Not special use, but just a condition of occupancy in general.
Thank you.
Hey, Mayor, I think I saw the applicant raising their hand in the corner wanting to chime in when we started this conversation, just pointing that out.
Thank you. Hold that for just a moment. Further?
Scott?
Every time I look at somebody, they point somewhere
Yeah,
else.
well, I just want to, I mean, I will be going for a second time. I am, but I just want everybody else to have it. Has everybody else
Right
spoken? Okay. So I was thinking about that very situation, because once upon a time, I sat on the Zoning Board of Appeals. And an applicant would come forward and, want a variance on their number of parking spaces. And, I think this is a situation where it's not ideal for the history that you just described to try to stuff 50 spaces into this lot. And it's going to be an impact on the businesses, the other tenants. And it's an unfortunate design. It's an unfortunate situation that they selected this site that, has these constraints to it, basically. And I'm not comfortable with, even if you could get the 50 in there, okay, between the back and the front, we're still counting on parking on Northbrook. It's not part of their requirement, but we're saying that's an overflow.
That is true. Yes,
Okay,
they're saying it's
okay.
overflow.
It's not, the Northbrook is not helping them meet the requirement, but it's a safety, a buffer, if you will, or a
There
safety
if
valve.
needed.
Right. You know, I think the points that were made earlier about that Northbrook and the entrance that's right almost immediately after you come off of Rab, and then you also have the drive-through for Gloria Jeans, it's just not laid out well. And I feel for the applicant, because I do know from talking to some of them that they had, they looked at like, I don't know, a dozen or so sites, and this was like the only one that fit a variety of constraints that they were facing, plus our own code. So I know it's not easy, but I don't think this is going to cut it for me on the special use permit. We put special use into this whole approval process for cannabis dispensaries because we wanted to be able to provide additional scrutiny, not to try to hold them to a higher standard, but to provide an additional scrutiny. And I think, but for the fact that they have to cross this threshold of special use permit, no, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But the fact of the matter is, we put this industry into the requirement of having special use, and therefore I think this discussion is very relevant and very important. And the other thing, I guess, to get off of parking and traffic for just a moment, I also want to talk about, somebody brought up about the closeness to residents. And I went back and I looked at our ordinance, and this may be something else we want to think about. Right now, the ordinance says that it can't be within X number of feet of, and it's all the R1, 1A, 1B. What about 2 and 3A? I mean, kids and families live there too. And it is very close to these residences, regardless of what the zoning is. And I think we need to keep that in our minds as well. That's all I got.
I'm only going to add one thing to clarify that when the applicants let us know that they would have access to parking across the street, they were really doing that more to satisfy any concerns that they could have more parking if anyone thought they needed it. But when they came to us, they didn't say that they were thinking it would be likely that they would need overflow parking. So just a clarification, that was kind of just, it came out of the conversation that they wanted to point out everywhere that someone could park in that vicinity.
So in fairness to the applicant, if you want to come forward, sir, generally we let appellants state their case, so I think you have every opportunity. If you'd state your name for the record.
Sure. My name is Sean Moyan with Revolution Global, here partnering and consulting with Illinois Health and Wellness. Councilwoman Smith, to your point about throttling order flow, we do have the capability via our online order system to govern how many slots we give in various windows, whether it be 15-minute increments, half-hour, hour increments. To Mercy's point, we do expect somewhere between 200 and 250 customers a day on average. Obviously, those flow in various peak times. Those peak times do not overlap with any of the existing tenants in the building, whether it be Gloria Jeans first thing in the morning. We wouldn't open until proposed 10 o'clock or after it's closed in the evening. The EMT space to our west would be closed for afternoon rush hour. So we have the ability to kind of manage through that process. We've done that in other locations that my firm manages. We have a location in Mount Prospect, Illinois, that is very analogous to this location, both in terms of size, in terms of location within the community, building structure, et cetera. That space runs with 29 parking spots and services 250 to 300 customers a day. So at that location, it's very prominent for us to utilize that system. If you were to order online, and as Mercy pointed out, roughly 2/3 of our business does come from online reservations, where you place your reservation, it gives you a list of times. If that time slot is already full, that time would not be available to you. So you move on to the next time slot. You then get a text message saying your order is now ready at that time, as opposed to being early. Obviously, I can't control if someone shows up. I wish I could, I can't. But to the extent that we can kind of massage or manage the expectations of the customer to come within their allotted window, we can most definitely do that.
Thank you. Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
No.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
No.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved for special use. That concludes our general orders. We have no new business tonight. We have no public comment post-meeting. Before taking a motion for adjournment, other concerns or comment? Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. I would just like to take this moment to again acknowledge and congratulate the 3 of our colleagues who got sworn in or re-sworn in tonight, especially one who jumped right in his first meeting. And I think that the citizens of Normal, as they always do, spoke in this recent cycle. And this is your council, and I am really excited to look forward with this council and all that we'll be able to do for the residents of Normal.
Thank you. Ms. Loren?
I'd like to provide a compliment and just an awareness of an event that happened yesterday. It was put on by the local Realtors Association, Mid-Illinois Realtor Association, and it was called the Fair Housing Affair. And it was a first of its kind event that brought together resources of the community and encouraged people who are experiencing instability in their housing to come to this space. It was held at the YWCA. It was an excellent event. I hope we can do more of it, and perhaps partnering with that Realtor Association. I'd love to see the community together and come together and do more of that. And the shout out of compliment that I would like to give, and I don't think she's here, but to one of our staff members, Jennifer Toney from the planning department. She was there representing the town of Normal and the various opportunities and programs that we have to provide assistance and grants and so forth to help homeowners and would-be homeowners. She was there 12 to 3 on her Sunday afternoon, and I was very proud to see a member of our staff stepped up and participated in that event. So thank you to her and kudos to her.
Ms. Smith?
I want to share a compliment that was given to Bloomington and Normal as a community. I had the pleasure of being able to participate in a focus group interview for March 1st with a group that's evaluating them. And for the most part, there were parents or siblings of citizens who have special needs that have used March 1st services. And a gentleman who lives in the Southwest, his brother was one of the first residents of a March 1st group home and has survived all his original roommates and is now counted 50 years there. And he has been nothing but pleased with the care that he's getting in the home, but also the welcome that he has in our communities. And that his brother shared that he has traveled extensively and he doesn't know of other cities that do so well. And I just wanted everyone to be aware that it is noticed how we take care of those who cannot advocate for themselves. So thank you all for being such a welcoming community.
Motion?
Yeah.
Mr. Byers?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just wanted to say thanks to the people of Normal for choosing me as one of their representatives. I was going to say, looking forward to getting to work, but I think the work has definitely started tonight. Looking forward to continuing to do it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. McCarthy?
I just wanted to say a quick congratulations to those returning members and to Mr. Byers for joining us on the council. Echo Mr. Pressman's comment about Town of Normal citizens getting it right, making the good choice, and from one who wasn't up for a vote, thanks citizens for helping us have a good, solid group of people to govern your community with. Thanks.
Well, I'll piggyback on that with just a brief comment that voter turnout in this last local election was significantly higher than it had been in previous elections, so let's keep that string going. It's very, very important that you vote locally. What affects you day in and day out most often happens at the local level, so thank you for voting. And a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Ms. Harris.
Aye.
Mr. Byers.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, we are adjourned.